Good day, everyone. Welcome to our lecture series on the subject correctional administration in preparation for our November to December 2020 criminology licensure examination. So basically, when we talk about correctional administration, we are talking about two basic approaches. One is the institutionalized treatment, and the other is non-institutionalized treatment. So we will prioritize in our discussion the topic on institutional corrections, and then after which we will be discussing on the non-institutional corrections. There are two approaches that we will be making use in the presentation of the topics. The first one is basically in the form of a lecture, and the second one will be in the form of a question with suggested answers. And then we will also try to, excuse me, rationalize, okay, the answers, and we'll also try to discuss why a particular option was taken as an answer for that particular question. Okay, so let us begin. Basically, in the history of institutionalized and non-institutionalized treatment, we are basically talking here of punishments. We are talking about penalty, okay, and what would justify the imposition of a punishment or a penalty for that. So in the early times, even in the Bible for that matter, when a particular person would have committed an act to the detriment of other people, then basically it calls the society for the imposition of punishment or penalty to prevent the same case from occurring. It is as good as saying that in order for us to prevent any untoward incident or any acts, okay, that is inimical to the safety of everybody, it is but important that we have to provide a certain degree of punishment which will serve as a deterrent to other individual, to other people, so that they will not do the same acts. And the early civilization are no different, okay, considering the fact that they are the first, okay, to come up with the idea of imposing a certain degree of punishment or penalty to any misgivings committed by its members. Okay, well, basically, okay, even before, okay, the existence of an organized society, they already have a system of exacting justice, and that is by means of what we call as the law of retaliation, or the so-called lex talionis. Okay, so even in the absence of a government, okay, controlling the affairs of the people, okay, people already had an idea on how they would exact justice, on how they would achieve justice the moment that they believe that they are wronged by other people. However, the problem with the so-called lex talionis is that the amount of punishment, or that the act of retaliation, sometimes does not correspond to the original crime that was committed. So that, okay, when a person would have committed uh, an act, okay, that resulted to the loss of one of the eyes, okay, of the victim, in the act of retaliation, it could even lead to the death, okay, of a particular person. So with that, okay, we could now come up with a conclusion that lex talionis is basically a two-tiered concept, meaning that not everybody is treated equal. Okay, in the sense that, as I have made mention, the acts, okay, produced, okay, may not be the same degree of punishment that will be received by that particular person, okay, during the act of, or in the act of imposing, okay, the so-called punishment. Okay, now that problem with the so-called law of retaliation was somehow corrected when Code of King Hammurabi came into existence, so that, okay, to prevent, okay, the aggravation of the acts, okay, considering the fact that when this process of retaliation would continue, okay, eventually, okay, it might result to the extinction, okay, or yes, to the extinction of one particular race okay, or culture for that matter. Okay, so that under the code of King Hammurabi, okay, they tried to somehow come up, okay, with the idea of retaining the so-called lex talionis, but with certain degree of parameter. Okay, so that under the code of King Hammurabi, it emphasized on the idea of the an eye for an eye in a tooth for a tooth, meaning that the penalty that will be imposed upon any person who would have committed a wrong against another will be equivalent to the harm done by him. So let's take this literally. If your actions led to the loss of the sight of one of the eyes of your victim, then under the code of King Hammurabi, it should also result to the removal of one of the sight of your eyes. However, not at all times that the so-called eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth could somehow be applicable, considering the fact that there are certain types of crimes that cannot really be let us say calculated. So in the case, let's say for example, in the case of rape, so what would be the appropriate penalty for that? It would be impossible that in order for justice to be attained in the case of rape, that you would also be raped. So that in those certain cases, what will happen there is that the part of the body that was used in the commission of the crime will be removed or will be cut off. Okay, so I hope that the idea of the imposition of this eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth under the code of King Hammurabi is clear for everyone. And then aside from that, another formal law that deals with punishment is found in the uh, Old Testament with respect to what we call as the Mosaic Code. So from the Mosaic Code, it is of course embodied in the book of Leviticus, when it talked about allowing the use of extreme punishment. That includes among others flogging, burning alive. However, what is notable about the so-called Mosaic Code is that the rights of the accused were somehow observed, considering the fact that any person who are accused of having committed a crime are actually given the benefit of the so-called rights. So that there is freedom from torture, and at the same time, the admission of guilt will only be admitted when there is a confirmation of at least one witness to the act. Simply because there are possibilities, of course, that when a person would have committed a crime and that he is wealthy, he could just pay somebody else to go and confess for the commission of the crime. Okay, so again, as the Bible is concerned, you will somehow find a similar philosophy expressed in the book of Exodus, particularly on chapter 21, verses 23 to 25, when it talked about the punishment, with the idea of lex talionis, and it is based on the notion of the so-called talion, or the equivalence of the relationship between crime and its punishment. So that if we could just try to come up with the so-called analysis or realization, the basic premises of why punishment and penalty is made available is considering that the Bible in itself already identified those acts that are considered to be wrong, and that it requires certain measures to prevent others from engaging with it. Okay? Now, another formal law that deals with punishment is with respect to the Code of King or Namo. So the Code of King or Namo is the representation of the Sumerian law. And at the same time, as far as the Code of King or Namo is concerned, it is somehow, let's say, it is a little bit lenient in as far as criminals are concerned, because it never allowed the use of death penalty as a means of dealing with criminal offenders. In fact, okay, the first observance, okay, as to the existence of what we call as restorative justice is found in this early code of, okay, penology, okay, wherein a particular victim is expected to be compensated, okay, for the losses, okay, that he has incurred as a result of the commission of the crime. Okay, now what really is the so-called restorative justice? Now, the idea of a restorative justice, okay, simply revolves around that of the victim, okay, as opposed to that of the regular process of our criminal justice system, wherein it revolves around that of the criminal offenders. In the case of restorative justice, it is, okay, more focused, okay, on, okay, whether or not, okay, the rights of the victims were restored as a result of the so-called victimization. Okay, so that, okay, if we are going to take a closer look, okay, at how the so-called restorative justice is applied today, okay, we can now see the direction that restorative justice basically attempts to re-establish the lost relationship between, okay, the involved parties. And in this case, we are talking about the offender and that of his or her victims. But the question, of course, is that, okay, what type of relationship are we referring to if the victim and that of the offender are a stranger with each other? Well, basically, in that case, the relationship that we are referring to is the peaceful relationship between the offender and that of the victim. Okay? Simply put it this way. If you are not familiar with the other and he is not familiar with you, then basically there is no rift that would be existing between the two of you. Okay? So if there is no rift, okay, there is no possibility of trouble. And if there is no possibility of trouble, then basically there is peaceful relationship between the two of you. But that peaceful relationship will be broken if, okay, somebody or if that particular person would have transgressed your rights, okay, that result to you losing, okay, let's say for example your money, okay, or other things valuable to you. That includes among others your honor, okay, and the like. Okay. Now, if you're going to look at the present day system, okay, of the so-called restorative justice, it relies on three basic principles. Okay, first, we need to restore those who have been injured. Second, okay, those directly involved, we are talking here of the offender, okay, they should have the opportunity to participate fully in the response if they wish. Now, this is the gist. Okay, and as far as restorative justice is concerned, restorative justice as a process cannot be undertaken if the participants are not doing it voluntarily. Meaning that when I am the offender and I do not admit, okay, that I am responsible in the commission of the crime, then definitely restorative justice could not take place. Because again, in the first place, the first requirement here is that there is voluntary participation between those involved in the squabble or in the crime. Okay. Another is that, okay, of course, okay, the spelling out of the importance of the participation of the society in the preservation of public peace and order. In short, that in the carrying out the principles and programs of restorative justice, it is noteworthy to consider, okay, that, okay, the community must always be present every time, okay, that the victim and the offender will undergo this process of restorative justice. Meaning that there must be somebody else, there must be someone else, and there must be an agency, okay, that would facilitate the restorative justice process between the offender and that of the victim. Okay? Considering the fact, of course, okay, that who will create, okay, the opportunity, okay, for the members, okay, or for this okay, affected individual to participate. Okay, so that, okay, the community's role or the society's role is, of course, okay, to create, okay, an opportunity for the victim and the offender who want to meet in this crime and discuss the crime and its aftermath. Okay? So when the encounter was made possible, of course, okay, what comes next there is that it is expected that the offender will make, okay, some sort of an amendment of his actions. Meaning that the offender should step in, okay, to repair the harm that they have caused. Thirdly, okay, there is a reintegration. Okay, under the normal criminal justice system, we are thinking of reintegrating the criminal into the mainstream of the society. But in restorative justice, it works both ways. It works for the restoration or for the reintegration, okay, of, okay, the victims as well as that of the offender as a whole contributing member of the society. And then, of course, we also have their inclusion. So when we talk about the so-called an inclusion, okay, uh, we provide, or that the society for that matter, the community for that matter, initiating the so-called restorative justice will provide an opportunity for these stakeholders. Meaning we're talking about the victim, the offender, and the community, okay, to participate in the resolution, okay, of the problem, okay, transpiring or existing between the offender and that of the victim. So if you are going again to go over the system or the process of the so-called restorative justice, it revolves around one thing, and that is the voluntary participation of all the stakeholders or all of those involved. Okay, next topic. So we have there the early civilizations and their concept of punishment. Okay, so we have there, of course, we always credit the Greeks, okay, to be responsible in the modern system, okay, of governance, something like that. They are even credited, okay, as the forerunners or the founders of the system of democracy. Okay, so the Greeks, okay, was one of, or is one of the early civilization that came up with a certain explanation, okay, as to the whys of a crime, of whys of why a crime is being committed. Okay, so first one there is that we have there the Nicomedean ethics. Of course, in some other books, it's not Nicomedean, but rather it is Nicomachean ethics. Okay, so it is the first recorded manuscript containing the first attempt to explain why crimes are being committed. Okay, so that in as far as this is concerned, the Nicomedean ethics, it explains that there must be some degree of what we call as corrective justice. And when we talk about of the so-called corrective justice, it means that there must be a process of restoring the balance between pleasure and pain. Meaning that the suffering of the offender restores the balance rather, between the injured and that of the transgressors. Okay? So that, okay, again, as what was mentioned here under the so-called Nicomedean ethics, okay, so it is talking about the relationship between pleasure and pain. It explains, among others, that the reason why people engage in committing crime is because there is pleasure in it. And in order for the society to put a stop or to prevent people from committing crime, they must have to impose a certain degree of pain that would somehow outweigh the pleasure derived by the offender, okay, from the crime committed by him. If we are going to look closely into the explanation of the Nicomedean ethics about crime, okay, then basically it is very obvious, gentlemen and ladies, okay, that, okay, it is leading to one particular theory that we already know, and that is basically, okay, the theory of utilitarian hedonism that was developed by no less than Jeremy Bentham. Okay? So come to think of it, okay, let us not think na nauna si Jeremy Bentham. It was actually the Greeks. And from the so-called Greek writings, okay, it influenced, okay, actually writers such as, for example, Jeremy Bentham, okay, in expressing their ideas and belief about this, okay, relationship between pleasure and pain. Okay? And then, of course, we also have the code of Draco. So the code of Draco basically, okay, is okay, uh, an early code, okay, under the so-called Greek civilization, okay, when it tried to come up, okay, with a classification of crimes or classifying all acts, okay, as a form of a capital, okay, offense, meaning, okay, or a capital crime for that matter, meaning that the from the simple crime of theft up to the worst form of crime in the form of murder, okay, are all, okay, considered as capital crimes, and all of them requires capital punishment, okay, that actually earned, okay, the name of Draco to be equated with words such as harshness, severe, among others. Okay? So when you are told, let's say for example in the board examination, okay, you were told or you were asked a particular question, what is meant by a draconian punishment? So draconian, okay, let's just go back, okay, as to why, as to what are the tawag natin dito, as to what are the words associated with Draco, and that is basically severe, that is basically brutal, okay, so words, okay, that are similar to that, okay, somehow defines, okay, the term Draco. Okay, so because of these actions of Draco, eventually, of course, okay, the Greeks, being a democratic society, they wanted to impeach Draco. And the first impeachment actually, okay, transpired in the case of Draco. And after Draco was taken out of his seat as the primary lawmaker of Greece, they tried to elect another lawmaker. Okay, and in relation to that, we have here the first question. Okay, so he is a great lawmaker who introduced the two kinds of suits, the public suit and that of the private suit. Similar to saying, okay, public crimes and private crimes. Okay? So the answer for that particular question is this. Okay? So it was Ercon Solon, okay, who introduced the classification of crimes into two, the private suit as well as that of the public suit. Okay? And Ercon Solon, okay, because of his notable actions in as far as improving the Greek civilization, okay, the term Solon, okay, is now being recognized, okay, the world over, referring to a lawmaker. Okay, so when you hear the words Solon in news flash or in when you read it in the newspaper for that matter, the term Solon is referring to a senator, a congressman, well, basically because they are responsible in the enactment of laws. Okay, and then we have there the different forms of punishment, okay, that was of course developed and perfected by that of the Greeks. Okay, so first one here is that we have there stoning to death. So from the word alone, stoning to death, you carry with you a stone, and whoever is being sentenced to death, then you can put your hands on it by throwing that stone, okay, towards that of the offender. However, okay, not in all crimes, okay, that this stoning to death is being applied, okay, considering the fact that stoning to death was first conceptualized by the Greeks, okay, in as a penalty for an adulterous woman. Okay, adulterous, okay, prostitute, something like that. Okay, these are the types of crimes punishable by stoning to death, because to the Greeks, okay, it would be unclean of you to hold, okay, an adulterous woman or a prostitute, and in order for you to be prevented from touching them, the best way of executing them is by means of stoning to death. And then, of course, we also have their breaking at the wheels. So breaking at the wheels, the reason why it's called breaking at the wheel, because literally you will be broken, okay, in the wheel. Okay, so you will be put, okay, you will be placed, okay, on top of a wheel, okay, and then they will try to spin it, okay, parang raffle draw, okay, and then the executioner will hit, okay, your vital body parts, okay, such as not vital but your limbs for that matter, okay, and your limbs, okay, and you will literally hear your bones cracking, because the idea there is that okay, after hitting your limbs, okay, you can no longer move, and the only part of your body that could move will be your head, and that would be the last part of the body that would be hit by the executioner. Okay, so the wheel will be spinning, and then they will be hitting you, okay, with a an instrument similar to that of a bat, baseball bat, okay, or a hammer for that matter. Now, there are many variations of breaking at the wheel. Another variation, okay, is what is being used, okay, on the latter part of the Greek civilization, okay, two pieces of wood, okay, or metal grinding each other, and then you will be put in between, okay, they will place you in between, okay, leg first or your feet first, okay, and then, okay, they will rotate it, okay, little by little, so that you will feel the pain, okay, of execution. The idea as to why, okay, they are prioritizing your feet is so that you will have a very agonizing death, and the fact is that they will do it slowly, okay. And then, of course, we also have the burning alive. Okay, so burning alive is a very common sight, okay, during the early civilization. Even in movies, okay, burning alive is being depicted as one of the principal penalties. But one thing is common in these movies, which is also a representation of how the Greeks, okay, use this so-called burning alive, because this is being used, okay, in cases of which the person is convicted to be a witch. Okay, so when a person is suspected to be a witch, for that matter, then definitely the penalty for them is burning alive. And they have a very funny way of determining who a witch is. So anytime that they experience some sort of a phenomena, okay, which they consider as a bad omen, such as, for example, an eclipse, or such as, for example, okay, the existence of a plague or a pandemic, just like the so-called coronavirus that we are having today. Okay, so what happens there is that they will try to locate that particular witch. They will look for a witch because they believe that it is the doings of a witch. Okay, so the very first suspect is, of course, okay, a widow. Okay, a widow living alone and living at the outskirt of the community, meaning sa gilid-gilid lang siya nakatira, kay mag-isa lang niyang namumuhay. So definitely, kay that is the first suspect to be a witch. They will drag that person out of the house, okay, bring it at the middle of the community, stockpile firewood around that person, and then they will burn them alive. Okay, the idea as to why they will have to burn them alive is because according to their belief, okay, when you burn, okay, a witch, okay, the powers of the witch or the soul of the witch can no longer transfer to another human being. Okay, meaning that they are already ending, okay, the witchcraft, okay, exercised or yes, being used by that particular person. And then, of course, we have their strangulation. Now, in as far as the board examination is concerned, okay, in strangulation, ang lumalabas naman dyan is in the case of criminalistics. Okay, so the usual question there is that what is the cause of death of in cases of strangulation? So the cause of death basically is through asphyxia or asphyxiation. Okay, and then of course we also have their poisoning. Now, poisoning is a form of punishment given only to the elites. Okay, the reason behind is that you will have to poison yourself to save your family from the disgrace committed or as a result of your action. So it would turn out that okay, you died of a natural death. Okay, although okay, uh, the poisoning is intentional, but then again, to save your family, okay, from the dishonor that might have been caused by your actions, so they will just ask you to poison yourself or to eat or to consume a poison. Another, of course, is that we have the banishment. Banishment is a simpler form of punishment, considering the fact that you will just be prohibited from entering into coming into a specified territory. Okay, so in the case of banishment, okay, take note that banishment eventually evolved into what we call today as transportation, but these two are very different. Okay, banishment, okay, you will be removed from the locality. Okay, you will still be around to, you will still be allowed to roam around, okay, uh, the borders of the community from which you belong, from which you originally belonged. But the moment you entered into that restricted area, okay, then the penalty of death awaits you. Okay, and then of course we have their imprisonment. Okay, while it is true that we have included imprisonment here in our list, but we do not consider imprisonment as a form of punishment among the Greeks, considering the fact that imprisonment, okay, was only used by the Greeks for purposes of, okay, preventive imprisonment. Preventive imprisonment is similar with what we call as detention. And what is the purpose of detention? The purpose of which is, okay, to allow the person to be retained in custody of lawful authority, okay, while they are undergoing trial or while they are undergoing investigation of their cases. And when they are convicted, okay, mamimili na sila dun sa kung paano sila parurusahan based on the original or based on the previous listings that we have provided. Okay. Aside from that of the Greeks, we also have there the Romans. So the Romans, okay, eventually, okay, okay, succeeded Greece, okay, as the as one of the superpowers, okay, countries for that matter, that or yes, empires, okay, that considers themselves superpowers. Okay, so the Romans initially, when they are still composed of a small group or a small civilization, okay, the ruling principle of law that they were using was basically referred to as the pater familias. So pater familias meaning, okay, pater is the father, familias is the family, so meaning the father of the family. Okay, so under the doctrine of pater familias, power is ultimately vested to the head of the family. And okay, since the power is vested to the head of the family, he is also vested with the sole authority to punish erring members of his family, including that of his or her slaves. The idea here, gentlemen and ladies, is that, again, okay, punish erring members of the family, so that when the child would have committed a crime against a neighbor, the duty of the victim is to report the incident to the father of the child. And the society will expect now the father to punish his own child. That is the idea there. Okay. The problem now is that what if the father refuses to punish his son? What if the father refuses to punish his own child? Then definitely the whole family will have to be banished. Meaning that if the father cannot punish the child or his children for that matter, then definitely the whole family will have to suffer the consequences. They will have to be removed from the community. They will have to be removed from the society where they belong, and in this case, the Roman society. And then, of course, we also have there the Mamertine prison. Now, the Mamertine prison, I know for sure that you are very much aware of this. Okay, so this is basically a type of prison that was initially conceptualized by the Romans, which is basically built underground. Okay, but please do not be deceived. Okay, uh, not because we called it Mamertine prison that we are already thinking at it as if it really was a prison. No. Mamertine prison is actually an instrument of death penalty. Why do we consider it as an instrument of death penalty? Because the people who are convicted in the Roman under the Roman system, okay, will have to be placed inside a pit, okay, an underground for that matter, and then they will cover the top, okay, and then requiring the offender to stay at the pit, okay, until such time that he will starve to death. So meaning, okay, if Mamertine prison is an instrument of death, then what type of death penalty is being used? Okay, it is a death penalty by starvation. And then, of course, we also have there, okay, the ergastulum. This is another prison. Okay, however, this type of prison is very different from that of the Mamertine prison. In the Mamertine prison, what is being confined here are criminals. Whereas in Ergastulum, what were confined here were slaves. To the Romans, there are only two types of people in the world. If you are not a Roman, then definitely you must be a slave. Okay? So it's just like looking for a carabao, looking for a cow for that matter. Okay? So when in an expedition and they have seen a group of people and they recognize them not to be Romans, then they will have to conquer them. If they were successful in conquering them, they will take their women, they will take their children, they will take able-bodied people and convert them as slaves. They become the property of the so-called Romans. Okay? So in this ergastulum, okay, a particular slave will be tied in his workbench. Okay? So let's say, for example, the area where you were seated, okay, you will be tied there, okay, and that you will be staying there for a very long period of time, okay, considering the fact that you will have to work and work and work. Okay? So all of your daily activities is there. Okay, you want to eat, you will eat in that area. They will give you your food. Okay, you just don't know when you will be given food for that matter. Okay, or and if you want to deficit, you to urinate something like that. Okay, you urinate, you deficit in your work station or in your work area. Okay, that's basically the ergastulum. Okay, and then of course the most notable contribution of the Romans, okay, and as far as the present day uh, system is concerned, is that we have there the so-called the Justinian Code. Now, basically, the Justinian Code is the representation of the Roman legal system. Considering the fact that the Justinian Code, okay, became the foundation of what we call as the Roman legal system, or the so-called the foundation of the Roman law. Okay, but of course, the Justinian Code was not just thought of within one night or one day, and then voila, okay, there is already the Justinian Code. It came under several, okay, degree of refinement. Okay, the fact is, okay, the Justinian Code, okay, was just taken from another Roman legal system, which is known as the 12 Tables. Okay, so the 12 Tables was considered to be the first major civil and criminal code of Rome. Okay, and prior to that, the people relied upon unwritten customs, okay, for legal guidance and the goodwill of okay, Roman politicians or the Roman patriarchs, patricians for that concern, for that matter. Okay, but then eventually, okay, since you cannot just rely on unwritten laws, so eventually they tried to codify it, okay, engrave them in stone tablets so that everybody would be aware of the contents of the law. Okay, and it gave birth to the 12 tables. Now, but because the Roman Empire at that time was actually falling, okay, so Emperor Justine decided, okay, to copy the content of the 12 tables, and after copying the content of the 12 tables, he ordered the 12 table to be destroyed. Okay, so what remains now is the so-called Justinian Code. And because, as I have said, the Roman Empire was falling, okay, so Emperor Justine, okay, has no other option but to flee. On his way out of the Roman Empire, okay, and by the time that they reached, okay, one of their stronghold, which is Byzantine, okay, pagdating nila ng Byzantine, they found out that they already have lost the code. Okay, after several hundred years, okay, the Justinian Code was actually found to be hidden somewhere in Italy. And when they learned that it was hidden in Italy, scholars all over Europe came to Italy to study the content of the Justinian Code. And after studying the content of the Justinian Code, they came back to the respective countries, and then they crafted their own legal system based on the idea of the so-called Justinian Code. And that is the reason why, okay, the whole of Europe was actually influenced by the so-called Roman legal system, including the countries that were conquered, or that, yes, that were conquered by these European countries. That includes us, of course, the Philippines. Okay, because you have to understand that the Spanish came to the Philippines, they introduced to us the Código Penal, and then we embraced the Código Penal. Okay, but of course, the Spanish are not the original authors of that, because they themselves, okay, has to rely on the concept of the Justinian Code. So that is why, okay, in as far as our laws are concerned, there are at least 3 languages, okay, that concerns our criminal law. First, of course, is the English text of our criminal law. If there is a misunderstanding between the so-called justices about about how they will explain the content of the criminal law, then they will have to go back to its original Spanish translation. And if still they cannot understand, they cannot come into an agreement, then they will have to go back to its Latin, okay, translation. Okay, so that through that way, or through that manner, okay, they will be able to come up, okay, with the meeting of minds as to what is really meant by an existing law, so that they could have a proper or good interpretation. Okay, so that is for the Romans. And of course, a country is not a country without a religion, okay, without a belief of a supreme being. So that, okay, every country, for that matter, during those early times, okay, has religious, so they have a religious guidance. And in that case, okay, it was the Catholic Church. Okay, so the Catholic Church, for that matter, okay, started to come up with their own system. At first, okay, they only tried to mind their own business. Okay, considering the fact that okay, the Catholic Church during those early days, okay, has also been marred by issues that involves their priests. So some of the priests are actually being subjected to death penalty, for that matter. And so that the bishop has to work on something. So the bishop, okay, talked to the king. They entered into an agreement that whenever a priest, for that matter, is being held under the king's court, okay, the jurisdiction will be transferred under the jurisdiction of the bishop. And when the priest is found to be guilty, then a more lenient form of penalty will be imposed upon him. And that particular system, my friends, is actually what we call to know as the benefits of the clergy. Okay? So that is the benefits of the clergy. Clergy meaning an ordained Christian minister, for that matter. Okay? But then eventually the Catholic Church sensed that okay, they need to do something for the people. Okay? So they tried to come up with a system that will not only benefit the clergy but also will benefit an ordinary person, because they believe, okay, during those times, that one of the reason why a person commits crime is because they are being possessed by an evil spirit. Okay, and of course, okay, if they are possessed by an evil spirit, then definitely the best way to do it is through, okay, religious, okay, intercession. Okay, and so we have there the so-called securing sanctuaries. So the securing sanctuaries, okay, these were built, or these sanctuaries were built all around Europe. Okay, so since it was built all over Europe, okay, it actually allowed, or it actually allowed the monks, for that matter, okay, to accept criminals, okay, to enter into the sanctuary for purposes of repentance. Okay, so the idea there is that when a person would have committed a crime, and if we would like to evade the punishment given by the king's court, okay, they need, okay, to arrive at the so-called sanctuaries before they could even be arrested by the king's soldier. Okay, so when they were able to enter the so-called sanctuaries, okay, they will be required to meditate, to pray for a period of 40 days and 40 nights. Because according to the Catholic Church during that time, okay, when you pray for 40 days and 40 nights, just like what Moses did in the Old Testament, just like what Jesus Christ did in the New Testament. Okay, so after that 40-day period, okay, somehow the person would be enlightened. At first, these securing sanctuaries, okay, were, okay, effective mechanism. But then eventually, humans will always be humans. They will always learn a way on how to, okay, what you call this? They will always learn a way on how they would be able to, you know, okay, on how they would be able to uh, abuse that particular process or procedure. Okay, so that eventually, when the Catholic Church, primarily the Pope, learned, okay, that criminals are using it to work on their advantage. Just try to imagine this. A robber would commit a crime of robbery, enter into the sanctuary after 40 days and 40 nights, go out of the sanctuary, and enjoy the fruits of his crime. When the fruits of his crime are already gone, they'll commit another crime of robbery. And then the cycle continues. Okay? And when the Catholic Church learned about it, okay, they became tougher. Okay? They came up with solutions to the problem that, according to them, in order to save human and divine law, they have to impose, okay, a stricter, a harsher punishment for criminals. So from that day forward, okay, the Catholic Church started to take an active role, okay, in the imposition of punishment, okay, to the common people. Okay, so just try to imagine that. They even work as judges for the king's court, okay, in trying a particular criminal offender, something like that. Okay, and so that gave birth to what we call now as the Holy Inquisition. Okay, so the Holy Inquisition started way back in 1215. And under the Holy Inquisition, basically, this, please take note of this, under the Holy Inquisition, it is one of the move of the Catholic Church that actually allowed the use of torture. So basically, the church can punish anyone, okay, including those people who are suspected of the crime of heresy. Heresy, so when you committed the crime of heresy, then you are referred to as a heretic. And if you are a heretic, it is simply because you do not share the same, okay, belief as that of the Catholic Church. Or even if you are a Catholic Church, but you are, or a Catholic for that matter, but you are questioning the authority of the let's say, for example, of the Vatican for that matter, then definitely you will be considered as a heretic for that matter. Okay. Another is that, okay, under the Holy Inquisition, okay, this is where, okay, the rampant punishment of those people suspected to be witches were penalized. Okay, so just try to imagine this. Okay, just because you don't look good on the eyes of these people, then they have reported you as a witch. And then right then and there, the church can go to you and punish you immediately, okay, by burning at the stake. Okay, and then of course, people who are conducting scientific studies are also being branded by the Catholic Church under the Holy Inquisition as criminals. The likes of Nicodemus, because you have to remember prior to that, okay, the Catholic Church, okay, believes that the earth is the center of the solar system and that the sun revolves around it. But this Nicodemus, okay, using his own calculations, found out that it is impossible for the earth to be the center of the solar system because he observed the heavenly bodies and the stars, okay, what you call this, change their position every now and then. Okay? And as a result, he was arrested. Okay? He was arrested for being a scientist for that matter. Another noteworthy person, okay, that was a victim of the so-called Holy Inquisition was no less than Galileo Galilei. Galileo Galilei has the same findings as that of Nicodemus. He found out that the earth is not the center of the solar system, but rather it is the sun. Okay? Another is that the Catholic Church during those times believed, okay, on the flat earth theory. They believed that the earth is flat. However, with the use of his telescope and observation, Galileo Galilei proved that the earth is round and it is not flat. Okay? And then as a result, okay, Galileo was arrested, okay, and he was subjected to isolation because the Catholic Church was afraid, okay, that by killing Galileo it would spur some sort of rebellion, okay, from the people. Okay? So we have there the second question. It is actually a review of what we have just discussed. So it is one of the early codes on penology that carries the concept of restorative justice. It puts an emphasis on the use of restitution rather than the death penalty. So our keyword for this particular question is the so-called restorative justice. Okay, so this is our keyword. Our keyword again is restorative justice. Okay? So from that alone, based on our discussion a while back, okay, we can already discern that the answer for this particular question is the Code of King or Namo. But what if the question goes this way? What is the earliest code on penology? So in the board examination, if that is being questioned, if that is being asked, you have to be very careful. I know for sure that what you have chosen here is the Code of Hammurabi. Okay? But basically, okay, you have to understand that the Code of King Ornamo is older than the Code of King Hammurabi. So you have to pay particular attention to the question. So when the question is the oldest code, okay, on penology or the oldest codification of law, then our answer for that is the Code of King Ornamo. Sir, I have read from a book that the oldest code is the Code of King Hammurabi. You have to read further the question. When the question goes this way, the oldest code prescribing savage punishment, then okay, 100% that the answer to that question is the Code of King Hammurabi. So what is the difference between the earlier question that I have posited and the question that resulted to the answer of King Hammurabi? The key there is the idea of harsh punishment. Take note, what we have mentioned a while back, that Code of King Ornamo does not impose a harsh punishment. Okay? So our answer, okay, going back to our question, early code on penology that carries the concept of restorative justice, okay, is basically the Code of King Ornamo. Another question. A Roman prison that was used to confine slaves where they were attached to work benches and forced to do hard labor in the period of their imprisonment. Okay? So basically, 2 examinations ago, this question was asked. And there is still a possibility that, again, this question could be asked because this is already part of their question bank. Okay, so again, the answer for this particular question is ergas tulum. Okay, ergas tulum. What is the earliest remedy for a wrong act to anyone in the primitive society? Okay? The earliest remedy for a wrong act to anyone in the primitive society, as we have made mention a while back, in the absence of a society, in the absence of a government that controls the affairs of the people, okay, these people in the earliest time already had an idea on how they would exact justice. And that is by means of, okay, retaliation. Okay, so retaliation basically, as we have made mention, okay, is the process from which, okay, you will try or you will attempt to get even to the person who have caused some harm to you. The problem, however, with this so-called retaliation is that if it is unchecked or if it is not balanced, then what will happen here is that it could even result to the extinction of the human race, considering the fact that the penalty that you wanted the person to suffer does not even correspond to the crime that was committed against your person. Okay. What do you call the price paid by a killer's family to the victim's family to atone for the murder and avoid reprisals during the Middle Ages? Yeah. Okay. So there are 2 possible answers here. We have their botes and then we have their werglid. In some other books, it was wergild. Okay? So botes and werglid. So in what way that botes and werglid are similar? They are similar in a way that when you committed a crime, all you need to do is to pay your victims. That is the commonality for botes and werglid. However, the differences between the two is the type of crime from which they were applied. If you are paying your victim because you committed the crime of murder to one of their family members, then basically that is werglid. However, if you are paying your victims because you committed a crime against them, but the crime is not murder, take note, the answer to that will be botes. Okay? So when you will be asked in the board examination and the question is not clear whether it is murder or whatever crime was committed, then the best, it would always be safe to use or to choose the word werglid, because that is becoming a generic term, that would encompass both the botes and that of the werglid. Next question. Which of the following was authorized in England in the 16th century? It partially relieved overcrowding of prisons. Okay. So the idea here, class, is that was there even a problem of overcrowding of prisons in England? Okay. So this is how it went. In England during the early days, what happened there is that, of course, as we have made mention, the most common form of punishment was in the form of death penalty and torture. And because the English government wanted to humanize punishment, they thought of measures on how they would be able to, to come up with a more lenient form of punishment. Most especially that according to them, according to some lawmakers during those times, not all crimes, could warrant the imposition of death penalty. Most especially in cases of children, in cases of prostitutes, in cases of vagrants, in cases of vagabonds. They cannot be given the penalty of death. So what the English government did was to come up with this idea of building a workhouse. Workhouse in the sense that they will be compelling these people to work under difficult and unpleasant tasks, because the idea there is that when they are experienced hardships, okay, during their confinement, then definitely they would be reformed, or they could change. So that was the idea. The constructed workhouses, the confined children, prostitute, women, vagrants, vagabonds. Until such time, okay, that the English government have seen profit from the so-called workhouses, because the workhouses were being exploited by businessmen for that matter. And so the English government wanted to increase their income. And as a result, okay, almost all people convicted by their courts, they are now being thrown into the so-called workhouses, with the idea that when the population increases, the income also increases. Little did they know that when the place was over-congested, was overcrowded, it was no longer functional. And it is no longer producing profit for the English government, because there is no more space for people to work, because it was all converted as a place of confinement. Okay? So, what the English government want is to kill all of these prisoners. But of course, notable individual, the likes of Jeremy Bentham, okay, are already on the way of questioning, okay, the government of even thinking of killing those people coming from the prison. And in order to avoid that, okay, the English government thought of a plan. And their plan is to transfer these offenders, okay, to their different colonies in America, in Australia, in New Zealand. Okay, so at first, they transferred them to their colonies. Okay, and because their colonies needs some sort of improvement as far as road constructions and the like, okay, they have what they did after is basically to, to just send them to these colonies. But then eventually they have seen an enterprising opportunity. And that is, okay, by way of selling these so-called prisoners and transferring, okay, the transportation of criminals from England to their colonies, okay, through businessmen again. These businessmen own these ships, which was eventually referred to as the galleys in the transportation of criminals. So these businessmen will take the contract from the government to transport these offenders to the colonies. Okay, and when they reach the colonies, they will have to sell these prisoners to the so-called to the contractors. Okay, who are of course, okay, building the roads, the bridges, the buildings, okay, in these so-called colonies. Okay, so if you are going to consider looking at how America, Australia, and New Zealand were populated, we will come to the idea that the ancestors of these people were all criminals. And if we believe in Caesar, with Caesar Lombroso, of saying that criminal behavior could be inherited, then perhaps all of these people from these former English colonies should have been criminal just the same. Okay. Okay. And then we have another question. What was the first English house of correction built for the purpose of profiting the state? The guiding principle of this workhouse was that by forcing people to work at difficult and unpleasant tasks, they would be reformed. Okay? So basically, our answer for that particular question is the St. Bridget's Well. But you have to remember, okay, that the St. Bridget's Well is also being referred to as the Bride Well, because the St. Bridget's Well is known also as the Bridewell Castle. Okay, and the word castle itself, okay, it was a former castle, but then eventually it was converted into a prison facility because it is suitable, okay, to be converted as a prison facility. Now, The term workhouse is generic. Generic ibig sabihin, okay, kahit saan, isa ang ibig sabihin yan. When you go to France, when you go to Belgium, okay, when you say workhouse, iisa lang ibig sabihin yan. Every country, however, have their own, okay, name for the so-called workhouse. In America, or in England rather, okay, workhouses are known as bridewells. Okay, when you go to Italy, they are known as the Elizabethan House of Correction. When you go to Belgium, they call it differently. Okay, there is a question later, okay, about that, so I will not be mentioning it today. Okay. He became the first pope to fully express approval for killing. Otherwise, human and divine law would be subverted. This is what I was saying, I was mentioning a while back, okay, concerning okay, the Catholic Church. When they are all fed up because the nature of the crime committed by the people is becoming more and more seriously believed, okay, that some action should be undertaken, and that action is to be more drastic, okay, in taking measures against the so-called criminal offenders. And the first person, the first pope to ever allow the use of death penalty as a means of dealing with criminal offenders is no less than Pope Leo the First. Okay, so Pope Leo the First, and then we also have their Pope Innocent the Third. Okay, so what was the contribution of Pope Innocent the Third? So if you will take notice, Pope Innocent the Third is not really innocent after all, considering the fact that in the whole history of the Catholic Church, Pope Innocent III, okay, is considered to be one of the most notorious in terms of using death penalty. Because just try to imagine, in just one decision, Pope Innocent III has convicted some 2,000 felon to die on death penalty. Okay, but of course, okay, since he is the Pope, okay, he tried to wash his hands like Pontius Pilate and transferred the execution of these 2,000 criminals to the king. Okay, and then we also have their Pope Gregory IX. So what was the contribution of Pope Gregory IX? Okay, so ito namang si Pope Gregory IX, his very contribution is him allowing the use of burning at the stake as a means of imposing death penalty. Okay, Pope Gregory IX, death penalty by burning. Pope Leo I, allowing the use of death penalty. Pope Innocent III, okay, most notorious for convicting 2,000 people to die, okay, on death penalty. Di ba? And then of course, we also have their Pope Innocent IV, another Pope Innocent. But then again, he is also not that innocent. Okay? Considering the fact that Pope Innocent IV, okay, is one of the Pope, okay, who introduced the use of torture in the Holy Inquisition. That according to the measure, okay, to the papal encyclical, okay, encyclical that was issued by Pope Innocent IV, okay, no admission, no confession shall be admitted if it was not obtained through torture. Meaning that in order for your confession to be valid, you should have been tortured first. Because according to Pope Innocent IV during that time, okay, torturing a person, okay, would lead him to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Okay, so that is Pope Innocent IV. Torture, okay, as a means of investigative measures during the Holy Inquisition. Okay, and then eventually, so let me ask, okay, if you are aware, okay, if you are aware of what you call this, if you are aware as to who reversed the belief of the Catholic Church before, okay, on the use of death penalty. So take note that it was only during the time of Pope John Paul II, okay? So Pope John Paul II, okay, officially reversed the culture of death, okay, that is being allowed and tolerated by the Catholic Church. So it was just this era, okay, around 1960s or 1970s, when Pope John Paul II became the Pope of the Catholic Church. That is the only time that the Catholic Church officially reversed the culture of death, okay, by the Catholic Church. Okay, and then we have here another question. This is the last question for the first part. Okay, so it was the period of recognizing human dignity. It is the movement of reformation, the period of introduction of certain reforms in the correctional field by certain person, gradually changing the old positive philosophy of punishment to a more humane treatment with innovational programs. Yan. So if we are going to consider looking at the question, diba? We have to really dig deep into the question so that we would know, okay, the setting of the question. Because the setting of the question is very important so that we would be able to know the answer for this question. Because there are two possible questions here, A or D. Okay? Well, of course, when you are going to read on the books, okay, the answer is very obvious. It is the age of enlightenment. Age of enlightenment, why was it known as the age of enlightenment? Enlightenment in the sense that the era before the age of enlightenment is also being referred to as the dark ages of correction. So from darkness comes, okay, enlightenment, comes light for that matter. So if you are going to again, okay, try to consider, okay, age of enlightenment, what was enlightened is actually the manner of which penalty is being imposed. Okay? So prior to the age of enlightenment, okay, the usual forms of penalty comes in the form of death. It comes in the form of torture. But then when people decided, okay, that these things are inhuman, that was the time that these people were also enlightened about valuing human life for that matter. So that, okay, as far as that is concerned, under the so-called age of enlightenment, okay, under the so-called age of enlightenment, okay, uh, the transition from the use of death penalty in torture to the use of prison as a means of dealing with criminals. There are, of course, very notable people, just like, for example, Isaac Newton, Francis Bacon, John Locke, René Descartes, Baruch Spinoza, okay, to name a few, okay, are just some of those who made enormous scientific and intellectual advances. Okay, they believe or they share a belief in natural law, basically as a philosophy. Okay, that and according to them, okay, uh, the fundamental to human nature and discoverable by human reason without knowledge or reference to artificial laws of society, okay, meaning that even without the so-called laws, it should be inherent on the part of us human, okay, to value human life. Okay, so definitely, okay, they came up with this idea of uh, humanitarian and scientific movement, which was eventually referred to as the Age of Enlightenment. Now, initially, a while ago, I have made mention that we have to pay particular attention to the question so that we would learn the setting. So, obviously, from this line of questioning, because it did not mention any place, okay, so we will come up with the assumption that that the setting was Europe. Okay, so when the setting is Europe, the same line of questioning, but the setting is Europe, the answer is the Age of Enlightenment. Let us try to somehow modify the question. Let us just add, okay, before the period on the last part of the question, okay, in America. So in America, okay, they share the same principles. They share the same observations, historical account for that matter. In America, they have been using death penalty in torture likewise as a means of dealing with criminal. But then eventually, okay, they wanted to make it better. Okay, so they wanted to use prison as a means of dealing with criminals. And that period, they do not call it age of enlightenment. Okay, but rather they called it the age of reformation. Okay, so what was reformed? It is not the person, but rather it is the manner of which penalty and punishment are being used. Okay, from the use of that penalty in torture, they tried to reform it. Okay, by changing it with a form of with imprisonment as a means of dealing with criminal. Okay, so that ends our first part, gentlemen and ladies. Okay, please watch out for the upcoming videos. Okay, particularly for the second part. Okay, good day, everyone, and then watch out for the second part of our lecture series.